The apologies that have been received already displayed on the screen, please. There they are.
Oh, yes, sorry, Chairman. Chris Donnelly
Right, so that's Chris Councillor Donnelly. Are there any other apologies from the floor, please?
Councillor Elaine Still
Is.
given apologies.
All right, Councillor Still as well. Thank you very much. Are there any further apologies?
Yes, Councillor Heron has also given apologies.
Councillor
Heron.
Right, moving on then to the next point, the declarations of interest. I'll read a paragraph through to you, if you don't mind. Members, you will have all received from the monitoring officer an email confirming that as you are in receipt of allowances from the County Council, then you will therefore have a disclosable pecuniary interest in item 4. However, due to the dispensation granted by the Conduct Advisory Panel, this does not preclude anyone from fully participating and voting on this item. We will therefore note all the members present as declaring the interest unless any member specifically requests not to. Further to this, members on the Fire Authority and who receive an allowance through an outside body appointment will need to declare an interest in addition to that mentioned. Can I please ask members of the Fire Authority who wish to declare an interest to press their button on the microphone so their names can be confirmed and recorded. I see I've got a number of hands up, so can I see first of all, these are people who've declared the interest, I guess. Councillor Theory, Councillor Price, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Parker, then Councillor Drew, Councillor Parker-Jones. Yeah. Do we need to go through the rest? Councillor Huggins, Councillor Manns, Councillor Dowden, Councillor Dunning.
Are they all on the file? No, these aren't all on the...
No, these are all the ones I think who are actually here today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's only the ones. So that's fine. So we've got those. Hang on a second. Then we've got some people with hands up.
Okay, in which case, I'll take Councillor North first.
Button because I'm not a member of the Fire Authority, so I didn't want to declare an interest for that, but I did want to declare an additional interest of the fact that I'm the leader of a borough council affected by LGR, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Todd?
I would like to declare the same interest.
Okay. And Councillor Porter?
So I think we've already got the dispensation for being district or borough councillors, but can I just disclose as well that I'm appointed to the South Downs National Park Authority by Hampshire County Council as well. But if we can, so I just want to confirm that I have a dispensation to speak and participate fully with that appointment.
I think we can safely confirm if it's a public body which relates to the County Council, it is part and parcel, unless there's a Fire Authority. Okay? Right. Let's move on then and go next to the final point I want to make. If there are any members who wish not to be included or declare an interest as a county councillor or have any queries or comments, please press your button. I don't think that applies in this case anyway. Sorry.
So I think for everybody, if you're a borough councillor or a county councillor, or if you're appointed by the county council to another body, then you're covered. The one thing, Mr. Chairman, I should just declare is that as a consequence of being appointed to the LGA by the county council, I sit on a committee where I do receive an additional allowance for doing that. And I think if you receive an allowance from somewhere else other than one of the existing Hampshire councils, that's where you should also just make a separate declaration.
Thank you very much. Right, let's move on then to the part one, matters for decision. On deputations, there are no deputations listed for this meeting, which then brings us to item 4, which is the local government reorganisation in response to a letter from the Minister of State for Local Government and Homelessness in relation to the 2026 local elections. And what I'm going to do here is to propose a variation in the standing orders for item 12 in the length of speeches. In other words, members, as of previous debates on matters relating to local government organisation, the standing orders are suspended for this item and adjusted to allow time for speeches in line with the budget debate, which has been circulated to you all by email. Before I move on, do you all agree to that suspension? Seems to be agreed around the room. Thank you. Right, the next point is to go on to the chairman inviting the leader. Leader, would you care to make your report, please?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming on today. I apologise for the fact that we've drawn you yet again into another extraordinary council. I think this chairman might be about to beat the record of the former chairman for the number of additional councils that you have to chair this year. We were, as you will see from the papers, asked by the Minister of State before Christmas to respond to a request that asked us 2 questions, and those questions are in her letter, which is appended to the report. The first is to ask whether we could give a view, or if the leader could give a view on postponement of elections, and secondly, whether in doing so that would release essential capacity to allow local government reorganisation to progress effectively. The officers have provided us with a comprehensive and very useful report that gives us the detail of that. As you will know, colleagues, from my email to you on Saturday morning, I would like to propose an amendment to that. The reason that I'm bringing the amendment forward is twofold. Firstly, I think we need to address the issue that to which the Minister refers around capacity, and as such, we need to be very clear about our view of that. And secondly, having discussed this with Cabinet, we would be minded to make the comment that to which the amendment refers around capacity. If there is an issue around capacity, then that capacity issue should affect the progress of local government reorganisation, should not be used as an excuse to defer the elections. And so that is the purpose of proposing the amendment. Councillor Warwick will second that for me, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very grateful to you for allowing us to propose the amendment, which I hope provides everyone with greater clarity. When we began this whole journey, which is now over a year ago, I made very clear that if we were at any point asked to make any judgment around the progress of both local government reorganisation and devolution, I would ensure that Council was consulted and that we took the views of the whole Council into account before we made any judgments and before we answered any questions of the government of us. And that is why we are here today. Cabinet and I will be meeting on Thursday to hear your views. We will take those into account at our meeting then. And although it is the role of the leader to write to the Secretary of State and the Minister of State who has asked us to respond to her, I will ensure that the views of this council are taken into account in that letter. Because at the end of the day, local government reorganisation affects us all, and it affects every single person in Hampshire. And it is important that we get it right. It is important that no matter the configuration of councils that the government eventually tell us they wish to pursue, that we then work together to introduce that new system in an effective and a safe way. The residents of Hampshire who rely on our services need to be reassured that the service they receive on the 1st of April 2028, when the system changes, will be exactly the same as their service that they received on the last day of the current system, 31st of March 2028. And that is the purpose for which we are all here, for which I very much hope our successors will be here in May of this year after that election, and that we should all be focused upon. I understand, I think we're going to be able to show the amendment. As I said, it is, I think, very much focused around the fact that, firstly, we've been asked whether elections should be postponed. My gut tells me, and my conversations with you all tell me, that none of us want to postpone elections again. We did so last year for a discrete and a very specific reason. No one likes postponing elections, but in doing so, we delivered a devolution deal for Hampshire and the Solent. We have delivered a deal that provides us with 1.4 billion in infrastructure funding over the next 30 years. It will bring hundreds of millions of pounds in investment in skills, in education, in transport funding, and it will give us the ability to influence policy directly in Hampshire and the Solent in a way that we have not been able before. And it also gives the opportunity for Martin to have a new job. So, amongst others. You're very welcome. But that job's done, everyone. We've worked incredibly well together. You have been enormously supportive. I'm grateful to everybody here who has worked so hard to ensure that that process has gone through. I was incredibly disappointed, as I think we all are, that the mayoral election was postponed. We are in the process of still negotiating with government to find out what changes we can persuade them to make to their original undertaking. It is very much my feeling that if they're not prepared to let a mayoral election go ahead in May, then they should have let it go ahead in 2027. There is no reason why that shouldn't happen alongside the unitary elections that are proposed for that year. The amount of funding that we are to receive, the degree to which the powers are transferred to us, all of that should not be held up, and we fully expect that the statutory instrument enabling that will be put in front of Parliament in March, and I will ensure that once we have the detail of that, that is brought back to you in February so that we can scrutinise it one more time as a council before confirming our agreement to it. So whilst we don't like postponing elections, that postponement gave us the ability to deliver that devolution deal, and I think it was something that was worth doing. Local government reorganisation and the enormous amount of work that we need to undertake to go through it is not a reason for us to postpone the elections. And that brings me on to the second point about capacity. To my mind, it is self-evident that if you're asking someone to do 10 jobs, and you say to them, well, if you don't have to do one of those jobs, do you increase your capacity to do the other 9? Then, of course, then that is the case. There is improved capacity to do that. Does it mean that we should be able, that we should wish to not do that first job? No, it does not. Does it mean that those other 9 jobs can be done any less effectively? No, it does not. But if the government choose to use the issue of capacity as a reason to consider postponing elections, then they should understand that our very firm view is, to my mind, that local government reorganisation dates should be moved to increase the ability for us to deliver those changes safely and effectively, rather than putting off our elections that are due this year and the elections that are due to other authorities this year. And we should take into account the scope and the breadth of the work that is ahead of us and ahead of any council that needs to undertake that local government reorganisation. Hampshire County Council looks after 5,500 miles of roads. We look after 4,500 miles of pavements. In any one year, we look after, we support over 12,500 children through our children's social care. We dispose of the waste from all 11 waste collection authorities across Hampshire, and we work in partnership with Southampton and Portsmouth to do that as well. We have 3,658 hectares of countryside. We look after, at any one time, over 20,000 residents who require support through adult social care. And in introducing local government reorganisation, the various services that we provide at scale across the county are in scope and are at stake. We will need to split up our safeguarding services. We'll need to think of a different way by which we can manage the various teams that are discrete and provide safeguarding around different aspects of children's social care. We need to think about the 30,000 people who are employed in our schools, over 450 of them. How can we work with, how can we ensure that our centralised teams still continue to work across different geographies in smaller sections to provide services for special educational need? What will we do with our educational psychologists? How will we manage our children's home? What will we do with the 3,500 people who work in our adults' health and social care? How will we disaggregate our foster carers? How will we ensure that there isn't an impact on service users by the fact that the new councils might need to compete with one another to engage with that? How can we ensure that our highways continue to be maintained to the standard to the standard to which they should be looked after, that Trading Standards continues to look after the goods that are sold across Hampshire, that our 29 county farms are still managed effectively, that our countryside services manage our country parks and our paths and footpaths. Well, there is an enormous scope of work to be done, and each of those different services will have a huge amount of work associated with them to begin to bring local government reorganisation forward. But having a lot of work to do is not a reason to postpone elections. So I welcome your views. We will all be listening in terms of Cabinet so that we can make sure that we reflect those on Thursday. I recommend the amendment to you. I hope in doing so, in bringing it forward, we are being open and transparent in showing you where our thoughts lie around how we ensure that the government get a very clear message that the most important thing here is holding an election to reconfirm the democratic mandate of the county council rather than using their request for us to talk about capacity and the job ahead of us as a reason to postpone it. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Leader. What I'll do now is invite questions to the Leader from the members. Not debate at this time, just questions. And before I go any further, can I just confirm that Councillor Warwick, you're going to second the motion?
Yes, happy to second the motion.
Right, so that's
Mr.
now
Chairman.
seconded. So questions, please, if you come through on your button. And the first question I see is from Councillor North to the Leader.
In terms of capacity, I'd much rather elections go ahead and LGR is postponed, but does the Leader agree with me that it's difficult to make a decision on capacity before the government makes a decision on the geography of the new authorities? Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. But I think that there's an important point as well there, I think, around the way in which we have managed this and the way in which the government have responded to us. Throughout the entire process of devolution and local government reorganisation to this point, we have provided, all of us, both the districts and boroughs and the County Council and our unitary neighbours have responded to the government on time. We have been on time with the information they wanted, with the proposals that they wanted from us, with the detail that they wanted, and we have made capacity available to be able to show staff from MHCLG around. I know that Councillor North has done that, as have I, in our various roles, and I know Martin has and Gavin has as well. We've all done it. We've all played our part, and we've done the piece that we need to do. The one comment I think I would make is that courtesy has not always been shown to us by MHCLG. Whilst we were promised an answer to our devolution questions before Christmas, we're still waiting. Will we receive an update on the preferred configuration of the new councils that the government decide before March, which is what they originally said we would receive? I very much hope so, but I fear that this is something that plays a part in their question here. That their capacity, their ability to provide us with the answer before the point at which election purdah would start forms part of their question that they're asking us here. Which is why, again, I say we need to be really careful and really clear that an issue of capacity is not a reason to postpone elections.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the leader? No, I see none. Thank you. What I'll do now is move on to the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrat Group to respond to the proposals and move any amendment that she may have. Councillor Porter, please.
Happy New Year to everybody. As you can see, I've been given a new meaning to the idea of a festive break. My grateful thanks to Winchester's A&E Department and Fracture Clinic. Their care has been exemplary. But this is about the county council elections and the amendment. And we've been here before. Last year, the Liberal Democrats wanted to continue with elections, but the elections were postponed. This year, the mayoralty elections have already gone, although I'm pleased to hear that there's a conversation about bringing them forward. But the Labour government is asking us if we'd like to postpone the county elections this year too. And our answer as Liberal Democrats is clear. We want the county council elections to go ahead in 2026. We aren't called Liberal Democrats by chance. It's because we believe in the democratic system of government. It's not currently perfect, but the public has agency in the process. And that is the public vote for their preferred candidate, and the party winning the most seats takes control. The 2025 elections were postponed against our will. But we haven't changed our view in 2026, and I was really pleased to see lots of nodding heads just now. I'm pleased that the leader clearly recognises the need to seek the political mandate to continue and agrees to the county council elections in 2026. Only despots withhold that right to vote fairly and regularly, and we know we are not that. But what does change in a year on is that the leader is now suggesting that we go ahead with elections, but as a deal with government, request that this council can put off local government reorganisation programme by at least another year. Leader, executive members, what are you waiting for? Because actually it's the district councils that are going to be joining together to make those unitary authorities. Hoping LGR is going to become a damp squib and might never happen. A coalition government with Reform and Conservatives hand in hand, why are you waiting? We need to get on with it. For what purpose? Because it costs too much to change the governance? Because Conservatives truly believe they're the only ones that can run high-quality social services? Which isn't true, by the way, because we know, for instance, Portsmouth have got the only green for highways in the whole of the south of the country. Hampshire is merely amber. Page 42 on the paragraph 42 starts to explore this, but it's much more complicated than just funding. But actually, funding is an issue. It makes change, the delay makes change harder for officers doing the LGR work. You start the work, you stop the work. You slow it down, you speed it up. It wastes money as elections are prepared but not carried through. We were told that actually we were ready for these elections in 2025, but actually they aren't being carried through, or weren't carried through. Makes the future uncertain for many employees who don't know whether they're going to have a job or not have a job. makes the future uncertain for the public reliant on county services. Who's going to be looking after them in a few years' time? Worries and creates more work for linked public and charity-run services, the ICB, HCT, who don't know who their funding will come from. It affects contract lengths that the County Council is making and also local authorities are making. It puts safeguarding potentially at risk as project plans change. It affects financial arrangements, big project forecasting and investment, resulting in the status of events and progress. It's the public as well who lose faith in the democratic process. This risks, I believe, our credibility as a council and as councillors. Why, if elections take place, is the principle of extending LGR handover linked. Elections are planned for 9 months, and we fully accept that. And we fully accept that the council has not been told, this council has not been told whether the LGR is actually going to be happening and the arrangements are going to be made, as Councillor North just mentioned. It's extremely unlikely, however, that the officers running the elections are the same as those working through LGR. If preparing for local government reorganisation is a capacity problem, I presume you'll have to employ staff, but for longer, which means you potentially incur redundancy costs. In responding to the government, we have to ask, why is Hampshire County Council giving a view on delayed LGR when we haven't had that answer so far of where we're all going to be in the future arrangements? Our top priority is to allow the public to vote for representatives that they should have had a year ago. But the paper, presumably endorsed by the executive, written by staff employed by Hampshire County Council, cites several reasons to delay the elections and delay local government reorganisation, but few, if any, reasons not to delay. So, the first is pre-election period decision-making. Well, I've been a councillor for a very long time, and I'm sure many of you have too. And it's been long established that no significant decisions are made in any pre-election period, whether a county election or not. Authorities have been doing this for decades now. We all accept that the public-facing decision-making cycle is effectively 42 weeks or less. The second is that Hampshire County Council is high-performing. But for how long? The biggest risk is finance and staff retention. The lack of finance leads to poor decision-making. Indecision and delay adds cost to decision-making, and change of timetable wastes money as work already done is actually repeated or cancelled. So Hampshire County Council has a significant financial shortfall from 27, 20 and 28 that can't be reconciled. So isn't it more of a risk to delay LGR into that period? What's the benefit of another year or more of delay? Social services do not have to be transferred by May 2028. Merely the creation of the unitary authorities prepared to buy services as an interim and with the ability to take them on in the long term. In paragraph 27, the paper promises that national changes are coming, and because those dates are uncertain, we shouldn't do anything. But actually, holding on to make changes with the old authority just adds more cost, confusion and recruitment issues. In paragraph 29, it acknowledges that LGR needs a dedicated programme team. Strengthening our case, it's not likely to be the officers managing the election. So Hampshire County Council procured that service from districts anyway. And Councillor House reminded us on Saturday, unfortunately he's not able to be here today, that if county and district elections are cancelled, then parishes will still need to go ahead. That puts a huge potential financial burden on those parishes. I believe that paragraphs 29 to 31 of the paper actually undermine the leader's substantive amendment to the substantive motion. So, as explored in the quality assessment in the paper, getting people to vote is hard. The ability to vote, this particularly affects the young and people in rental homes with rurality, poverty and minority ethnic groups. It's more difficult to vote if you don't have a permanent address and or documentation to vote. Try going on and getting your voter ID. It's not an easy process. The voter system scheme gets more complicated every year too. The Tory change to voting added a significant issue to men and women who marry and change names to support the family name. I had to encounter several of those last couple of years ago. So a number of our Liberal Democrat colleagues can't be here today. As we know, there are many gaps in the chamber today. But we are of one voice. Liberal Democrats say clearly to this meeting, as well as to our residents, our local businesses, and young people who may be eligible to vote in the future, that we want the county elections to go ahead in May 2026. And we believe that the LGR, the local government reorganisation, should not be delayed further. So we would like to replace the words, and actually we've got an amendment which I'd like to put up on the screen if I could, please. And actually, I can't read this any better than you can, I don't think, on here. The green is really hard, by the way. It's not very good in disability access, or even anybody access, and everybody's looking this way. That we're actually asking that the County Council, to replace the statement that the County Council, having constructed matters set out in the report, including the capacity considerations, recommends to Cabinet that response to the Minister's letter should be indicate a view that, to replace it with the County Council election for May 2026 should not be postponed, that it has a confidence in the capacity of Hampshire districts and boroughs to deliver county, district and parish elections effectively and efficiently in May 2026. And then the second part, actually, with reference to the Cabinet, and then that part is replaced by, the section is replaced by the County Council elections for May 2026 should not be postponed, and that Cabinet has confidence in the capacity of Hampshire's districts and boroughs to deliver county, district and parish elections effectively and efficiently in May 2026. And then goes on to agree with the Minister to write to the Minister. I am very keen to make sure that we separate the issue of elections with the issue of capacity. I know our council is, our group is too. I'd like to put that forward as an amendment to the original motion. I believe it should come first before the one that Councillor Adams-King's placed forward, but I'd like clarity on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so what will happen is we'll take all the amendments that we get today, and then we'll start with the last one, and we end up back at Councillor Adams-King at the end
That's
of
fine.
that
Thank you very
section.
much indeed. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for your...
Yes, I do. Councillor Todd.
Yes, I'll second.
Right, Councillor Todd is seconding. Right, okie-doke, thank you. We'll come back to that later. I'm going to move on now to the leader of the independent group, who, I mean, I presume, Councillor Todd, you'll speak later anyway, so that'll come back. So we go on to Councillor Tree, leader of the independent group. Again, you can respond to the proposals and move any amendment if you wish.
Thank you, Chairman. This is going to be very interesting, responding to an amendment that I saw for the first time about 2 minutes ago. So I'll do my best to respond to the lot. So I guess I'll start by saying that we've become so used to this kind of discussion after last year that it started to become normalised. But postponing elections for anything other than a major crisis, such as a war or pandemic, is anything other than normal, even with local government reorganisation looming. Members of the public may be watching this, and I think it's worth noting that I have no agenda. I'm the incumbent county councillor for Whitehill, Borden and Linford, and so if the election is cancelled, I would continue to hold my seat. However, democracy is sacred, and my view is that elections must go ahead, and I would only ever want to be a councillor because people have faith in me to elect me and not because the election is cancelled. Voters across the rest of Hampshire also deserve the right to elect councillors of the party of their choice. However, in order to achieve this, we have to look at what the ministers actually asked and ultimately asked of the leader. In the letter, the minister writes, "I'm therefore inviting you by midnight on Thursday, the 15th of January, to set out your views on the postponement of your local election and consider if this could release essential capacity to deliver local government reorganisation in your area and so allow reorganisation to progress effectively. For those who have already made their views known, we'll be taking these into account." And then where the view should be sent to by email. I think the key phrase there is essential capacity, as obviously postponing an election would always release some capacity by reducing the work, resources, and allowing it to be reinvested in other important areas. But that would never be acceptable, as elections are a vital part of democracy. If I supported the amendment proposed by the leader, and of course I can comment on that because we've had advanced sight on it, all councillors, it would be on the basis that we do not need to release capacity based on clause 30 of the Cabinet report, which reads, Resources and capacity to administer and deliver an election in 2026 are already planned and earmarked. Established arrangements are in place for the formation of a new administration, including the election of a leader and appointment to cabinet and committees, as well as the induction briefing and policy support for new members and portfolio holders, all of which normally require significant senior officer involvement. The Secretary of State has also said that they've adopted a locally led approach. He is clear that a council say that if they have no reason for postponement, then we will listen. But if you voice genuine concerns about your capacity, then we will take those concerns seriously. To that end, the Secretary of State is only minded to make an order to postpone elections for 1 year for those councils who raise capacity concerns. And so here lies the issue. We can vote through a motion that says we want the election to happen, but that is not the question. The question is, do you have the capacity we require you to have to deliver local government reorganisation? And therefore, I am concerned that by suggesting a 1 year delay to LGR, the Secretary of State could interpret that and take a view that we do not have capacity to meet the required timescales, and therefore could postpone the election on that basis. Last year, Hampshire County Council did ask to be on the fast track for local government reorganisation and requested a postponement of the May 2025 elections on that basis. And I should just note that was a cancellation request that I voted against. I would say to cancel the election, for the government to cancel the election, would be farcical. The work involved in LGR has been known for some time, and voters were told in May 2025 that Hampshire County Council elections would only be postponed for 1 year. And I truly believe that honesty and integrity is at stake. If the shadow authorities were set up in May 2026 with elections to them instead, and Hampshire County Council was being abolished in less than a year, I could understand the rationale. However, this is not the case, and there is no 100% guarantee on the current LGR timescale that everything will happen as currently scheduled. We had a devolution timeframe with a May 2026 mayoral election scheduled, and look at the shambolic handling of this. Now a combined authority will be set up with no mayor to head it, with elections for that office being pushed back from May 2026 to May 2028. And that is proof that things can and do slip. Our hard-working officers are already working as best they can to navigate our budget, local government reform, and all the challenges that HCC faces. And so I would say, how ridiculous is it that time has to be spent on writing reports for this agenda item today and also Cabinet? Maybe we should tell the government to stop wasting our councillors' and officers' time, and we would have more capacity to serve our residents. So now turning just very briefly to the amendment, I'll consider it carefully. Again, the concern is that we said we want the election, but we hand on a plate to the government a reason to postpone the election by not meeting their criteria. So I'm mindful to support to consider the Lib Dem amendment, but I would like just when there's a comeback and a clarification that we vote the order of amendments we vote in, and it would also be useful to know that I assume there's a final end vote after all the amendments are voted on, where the final substantive item is then clarified. So in theory, a member could vote against every proposed amendment, but still vote ultimately in favour to the final version. Is that's correct? Yeah. Okay, fine. So, I mean, just to make a point, about around two-thirds of registered voters do not vote in a local election, and people have made the comment that how important is this if so many people don't appear to be interested, don't engage with the democratic process? I think I heard that argument in the chamber a year ago. And that's registered voters, of course. So that means the actual number of residents who normally vote in a local election could be closer to around 1 in 5. I think that's really sad, and I think the endless talk of cancelling elections potentially turns off that engaged minority. The public can't keep up with what's happening and what isn't. I have people asking me, confusing and conflating mayoral elections with county elections and different elections, and people just don't know what's going on. But the general theme of understanding from those who are engaged is that people in power want to cancel elections and don't want accountability and don't want et cetera, and that is a concern. No one's mentioned the budget, but of course an unelected council, or dare I say a council with a now expired mandate, whatever you wish to call it, will be setting a budget and precept. And I do see the argument that residents could put forward to say that this is a case of taxation without representation. And that does make me genuinely uncomfortable, and I just don't think it's acceptable. So, and I say a little tongue-in-cheek, an argument's been put forward to say that we shouldn't be having elections because if an administration changed, you could find inexperienced councillors and that could cause issues. I've heard that argument, but of course, officers run the operation of the council. Councillors set the strategy, and actually there is, if an administration changes, that is ultimately the will of the people, whether I like it or whether I don't like it, whatever the people in the room think. An example would be I was elected to East Hampshire District Council in my other role in May 2023 for the first time, and within about 10-15 minutes of my first ever full council meeting, I was elevated to the position of deputy leader due to the political fate of that council. And I'm rather biased. Thank you. I'm rather biased, but I think I've done an okay job. As difficult, and I will say, as difficult as it was in the early days to get my head around a brand new job in a brand new council. But again, I've coped and I've managed and I've been able to do the job. So to summarise, the leader says he does not want the election to be cancelled, and I agree. Paragraph 30 says resources and capacity to deliver an election in 2026 are already planned and earmarked. So I ask, what is there to discuss and debate? Based on that, there could be no valid argument to postpone on the basis of capacity needed to continue the LGR process. Therefore, I implore members of today and Cabinet later in the week to support having the May 2026 elections and for the leader to make the position crystal clear in the response that we do have the capacity for those elections to take place. And I think we can send a very strong signal to the residents we serve today. None of the amendments suggest that the election should go ahead, so there seems to be consensus. Say the election should be postponed, sorry. So there seems to be consensus that the election should go ahead. It's just a case of the exact wording and how that's interpreted by government. And I'm sure, as all other members are doing now, I'll consider carefully how I vote with the amendments in the final motion. Thank you. Right. No amendments, by the way, from the independent group.
Right, thank you, Councillor Tree. In which case, then we'll move on to the leader of the Labour group, Councillor Taylor, please. Again, you have 30 minutes if you wish to have it.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, a happy belated New Year to all members. And I hope you had a really nice break, but not in every case, as it would seem. And I think Councillor Crawford would have some sympathies with you, having had a similar situation. No suggestions of anything untoward there. I expect, like many of you, I was giving the Minister's letter a lot of thought over the Christmas break. I found myself frequently torn and plagued by guilt when thinking about having to choose between democracy and the potentially horrific outcomes if the LGR transition did not go smoothly. No one wants to see somebody's Aunt Alice cold, unwashed and hungry because of a system failure the day after vesting day. At times, I was upset and even very angry too. It felt wrong that we should be asked to consider this again. The Elections Commission says this places councillors in a difficult position with conflicts of interest, and especially when elections have been cancelled the previous year. It doesn't matter how well intentioned the government might have been in asking for our opinions. The fact remains that we debate and make decisions in public, and we stand to be the public fall guy when things go wrong. The public doesn't understand that this is actually a government that will make the decision, and that the decisions, I'm afraid, will be made quietly behind closed doors. We're the ones who are in the public, debating in the public, and everybody thinks it's our decision when it's not. That said, after a few days of angst, I looked again at the letter with fresh eyes, and I put my educator's hat on and looked at it like it was an assignment. What exactly was the context, and how could the task be broken down into its component parts? Well, we are just being asked for an opinion, not a decision, and on two questions. Do we think the elections should continue in May? And do we think postponing elections would release capacity to manage the LGR process? I've concluded that the answer to question one is yes, the elections should go ahead. I won't debate why. I'm sure everybody's got good reasons for that. For question two, I thought about this with a project management hat on, And I would also actually answer yes, that obviously postponing would release capacity. This is especially true of decision-making capacity. I don't think the general administration of elections, e.g. ballot papers, counting, telling, that's not a concern. That's not the capacity that is of any real consequence. We know that we are ready, prepared, and officers will deal with that really easily. So the real issues around capacity are decision-making, with elections taking 3 months out of the process, and the project timeline. And we have lots of other projects as well, which are mission critical. We've already mentioned some of them, the finances, making sure that we keep our finances straight. We know there are lots of other government things that will be coming out around SEND and other things like that that we have got to put in place. Unfortunately, those mission critical projects are all using the same officer, political, leadership and management capacity. So that makes it hard. I believe we can say yes to both questions, and I don't think the questions are mutually exclusive. Saying yes to both does not mean our desire to proceed with elections is conditional on something else happening. I appreciate that some members may feel that to do anything other than to give a straight yes to elections risks the government using it as an excuse to cancel them, but I don't agree. The government has consistently repeated their statements that they will respect the wishes of individual councils, and I have to accept that at face value. If they don't, they will bear the brunt of the unhappiness of the electorate, not us. As well as saying yes to both questions, I also think that we have a moral duty to point out to government anything we have identified as a risk to successful transition. I focus on the fact that the government is the project owner and sponsor, and we are the implementation team. All successful projects have risk management registers, identifying risks and putting in place mitigations. The outcomes of a poor transition will be horrendous, and I am sure that many members in the course of this debate will identify some of those things. Someone's Aunt Alice might just die. And I would say, you know, the idea that we could say that, you know, new unitaries could just buy services. From whom? We won't be here to provide them. From whom will they buy them? That's really not a very sensible approach, to be honest. I do have a lot of sympathy, though, in just getting on with the job, because this just feels like it's dragged on a long time. But I do also think that not identifying risks and suggesting possible mitigations would, in my opinion, be a breach of our covenant with residents and a failure of public stewardship. So I think it's right that we should do that. As well as a possible extension to the LGR project timeline, I also believe a good mitigation is to ask the government to announce the chosen LGR option earlier, possibly in February. That then enables some decisions to be made and facilitate officers working on due process while the rest of us muck about with elections. So I would ask the leader to undertake a number of things. One is to ensure that in any response we are clear that any issues that we are raising in relation to risks and suggesting mitigations for are not conditions. That our yes, we want elections is unconditional. The rest is us fulfilling our duty to raise and identify risks that might impact upon our residents, and ultimately they will decide whether they want to accept those risks and whether they want to take mitigation actions. They are the project owners. Thank you, members, for listening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. We now move on to the seconders. I'm going to invite, we'll deal with we've only got one amendment put forward out of those so far, so we've got two. We have, yeah, you're dead right, yeah, absolutely. We will deal, obviously, with the last amendment first, so the Liberal Democrat amendment, okay? And I'm reminded we haven't had our general debate yet. So basically, you want the general debate on the amendment or on everything? On everything. Yeah. I'm advised we are debating on everything, including the Conservative amendment and the Lib Dem amendment. So those who wish to speak, well, I'll take you in turn and be advised by the officers as I go along. Right. I have one speaker showing, and that is Councillor Manns, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and may I wish you a happy new year. Many council members will know previous council meetings, I took a view that the plans before us were not the ones that I would pick. And I pointed out that I'd prefer Test Valley and New Forest to be part of Core Hampshire, simply because it would reduce the cost to the taxpayer, i.e. the council taxpayer, of that particular change in terms of having a new unitary authority. I make that point because I do believe that we should ensure that any changes we make, the costs to the council taxpayers are minimised. Having said that, there obviously are going to be extra costs. And for that reason, I'm particularly against the idea of a fifth unitary authority in Hampshire. Having made those points, I totally agree with what the leader said about the complications of disaggregation. He mentioned a number. The leader of the Labour opposition also mentioned others. I agree with both what they said. I would argue there's a few others as well, notably Hilliers Gardens, for instance, the Records Office, just to mention two others. But what I really want to say is, regardless of that, we do need to appreciate that we live in a unitary state governed by Parliament and not a federated state. And final decisions are taken at the centre, not by us. I think it's absolutely right that we're pointing out to the government the difficulties if there isn't a postponement. But having said that, to actually make the point that despite that, we think the electoral mandate, the importance of the people deciding, comes first. So having made those two decisions of the difficulties in dealing with a PERDA period and still going ahead with the election in terms of meeting the timescales for the proposed unitary authorities, nonetheless, we feel that we should have an election. And I fully agree with that view, and I will be supporting the leader's amendment at the end of this debate. The final point I'd make is simply this. It is pretty disingenuous of the government to ask us to ask them whether we should postpone the election when it's their decision and not ours. And if you want a good example of that, look what they did about the election of mayors. They didn't consult. They simply took the decision to postpone them for 2 years. And therefore, I think the final thing I'd say is simply this. This is not our decision. This is a decision by central government, and they should actually get on and make that decision one way or the other and stop messing around.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crawford, please.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard, LGR is one of the most significant changes this Council and our residents will ever face. But we all share responsibility to ensure that it is deliverable, affordable, and does not undermine the services that people rely on every day. Government needs to recognise the scale of what it is asking us to deliver. Preparing for and implementing LGR alongside a full electoral cycle is a major undertaking. It requires capacity, staffing, systems, estates work, and electoral delivery all across Hampshire and the Solent. This council does not have the financial headroom to absorb those costs. That's not a political point, it's financial reality. We cannot fund a programme of this magnitude from existing budgets or reserves without increasing risk elsewhere. That is why the Leader's Amendment recommendation is reasonable and responsible. Support for the May elections should be tempered by the government providing sufficient time and funding for LGBR to be prepared. Without those, we could be setting ourselves and our successors up to fail. Equally important is the need to protect business as usual services in the run-up to handover to the new unitaries. LGR will place sustained pressure on finances, leadership and staff. Exceptional financial support through to at least 2028 is not a nice to have, it's essential to maintain service continuity, workforce stability and financial resilience while LGR is underway. EFS is about protecting residents from disruption, safeguarding frontline services and ensuring we remain a financially responsible authority during a period of profound change. There is also a wider principle that should unite us. LGR will only succeed if it works for the whole of Hampshire and the Solent. There can be no winners and losers, no boundary drawing for advantage, and no fragmentation that weakens future unitary councils before they even begin. Members, ambition alone will not deliver LGR. It requires funding, certainty and realism. The approach before us today reflects all three. There's one final point I would say, in following on from what we've heard from Councillor Taylor, I would say that actually the preferred option for LGR, the government should let us know by the end of this month. Next month is not good enough. We need as much time as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call Councillor Withers, please?
Thank you, Chair. As Chairman of the Health and Adult Social Care, I fully support the principle of democratic accountability and recognise the importance of elections in maintaining public confidence in local government. Elections are a cornerstone of our democratic system and provide residents with a voice in shaping the future of their communities. However, I also have a responsibility to raise significant and legitimate concerns about the potential impact of the May 2026 elections on the implementation of local government reorganisation in Hampshire, particularly in relation to adult social care and adult public health services. The May 2026 elections fall at a critical stage of the LGR programme, likely during the foundational or shadow authority phase ahead of the intended vesting day in April 2028. This is a period that requires sustained focus, stability, and a capacity at both member and senior officer level to ensure the safe and effective transition of complex statutory services. There is a real risk that the elections could introduce political instability or policy shifts, particularly given differing views across parties in the preferred LGR model. Changes in political leadership or priorities at this stage could disrupt agreed implementation plans for services that currently operate at county level. Capacity and resource pressures. As post-election activity, induction of new councillors and administration formation would invariably divert senior leadership attention away from detailed LGR planning and service transition work. Operational disruption, with adult social care and public health particularly exposed to their scale, complexity, and the vulnerability of the populations they serve. Workforce uncertainty. At a time when recruitment and retention in social care is already challenging, previous reorganisations demonstrate that prolonged uncertainty can lead to staff loss, increased vacancies, and reduced morale. Challenges for system partners, including the NHS and police, who consistently stress the importance of stable governance structures and clear points of accountability during periods of change. While LGR offers potential long-term benefits, including more integrated services, stronger prevention, and improved financial resilience, it does not remove the underlying pressures facing adult social care and public health, nor does it eliminate the risks associated with large-scale structural change. From a health and social care perspective, the overriding priority must be continuity, safety, and the quality of services for our vulnerable residents. Any process that risks fragmentations of services, diluting expertise, or destabilising the workforce must be approached with extreme caution. In summary, while I respect the LGR process, I believe there is a strong case for delaying its implementation, as this is the largest local government change facing Hampshire in our lifetime, and I therefore endorse the Conservative recommended amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor. I'll now call Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would just like to point out I lived in Africa and I saw firsthand what happens when you delay democracy. It's not right. The elections must go ahead. And I was reflecting today on the suffragettes, Emmeline Pankhurst and Millicent Fawcett, who fought so hard for women to get the vote. And I wondered what they would think about there being talk of elections they fought so hard to vote in being delayed. So we must go ahead with the elections. I have huge concerns about rushing through local government reform, given that we do not know what model will be chosen. We have outstanding children's services, and that isn't an Ofsted rating. It means that on a daily basis, we look after our most vulnerable children and young people. And I think Councillor Taylor is absolutely right to bring it down to those individual cases, like somebody's Aunt Alice, or some child who's brought into care through no fault of their own. Leader, you mentioned disaggregation of services such as foster carers. Fragmentation is a key concern. It's a key concern, and we don't know what model we're working to. I also just think ahead to the projects we're still working so hard to deliver, like Swanwick Lodge, our family hubs, the way we're working to integrate special educational needs and school transport. We cannot do anything to risk these individual children and the quality of their lives. We're not just talking about local government reform. We are talking about individuals. And I think it would be really wrong to forget that it's individual lives at stake. So, Leader, I would like to support your amendment. I think it's right that we have democratic elections. But I think, as Councillor Taylor also says, we've got to highlight the risks. And I personally think the risks are such that we should advocate that we delay local government reform. And I have to say, I'm going to end with an African expression, haraka haraka hayina baraka, which in Swahili means, in a rush, there is no blessing. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor. First time we've heard Swahili in this chamber. Can I now ask Councillor Harrison, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It's very difficult to follow Swahili, isn't it? I'll have a go. Chairman, they always used to say that we live in interesting times, and there are only two certainties, death and taxes. I think I would add potholes to that list. And one suspects, doesn't one, that whatever the reconfiguration of local government we see in the future, we will always have the problem of potholes, and there won't be sufficient resources to deal with it. And I rather regret the fact that local government reorganisation has taken away some of the capacity to deal with all those day-to-day things that we should be dealing with. Chairman, we're gathered here today in order to discuss whether we should accept the government's kind offer to once again delay elections. The answer must be a resounding no. I didn't think it was right that we cancelled them last time, and it would be inconsistent if I voted otherwise now. Frankly, the last time the majority here voted to postpone elections, it was stretching democratic legitimacy. In common with other members, I was elected to serve a 4-year term, not 5 years or 6 years. Now, I appreciate this makes the work of officers managing the whole process more difficult, but at least they will be taking instructions from politicians who have the democratic mandate to take these things forward. It's always very tempting for politicians in power to find some reason to stay in power. But we live in a democratic country, and we only govern with consent of the people who go out and vote. We must not undermine this important principle. Yes, I have no doubt some here may lose their seats. Why, it's even possible I may lose my seat, shocking as it seems. However, not a single one of us has the right to continue beyond May without the endorsement of the electorate. When it comes to the vote, I will be saying to the government, thanks, but no thanks. The people must have their say.
Thank you, Councillor. The next councillor who's asked to speak is Councillor Minahan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see that I'm in good company, that nobody appears to want to delay to the May 2026 elections. Hampshire County Council, after years of savings and cuts, is now a very lean organisation with limited capacity to absorb additional pressures. We are undertaking the largest local government reorganisation in recent times across a population significantly larger than areas that have recently been reorganised. With the backdrop of the increasing demand in health, social care and SEND. From March 2026 onwards, we face elections, member inductions, detailed LGR implementation across more than 150 service areas, major national policy changes and the delivery of all statutory services simultaneously. The report itself recognises an unprecedented strain on capacity. I can't help but be concerned when this organisation is stretched. It's our most vulnerable residents who are most at risk. They need stability, continuity and focus. Democracy, I think we all agree, must not be a casualty of reorganisation. If the timetable does prove unmanageable, the responsible option is to extend the timeframe of local government reorganisation rather than delay elections or compromise essential services, because local government reorganisation is an arbitrary timeframe, and I support the Leader's recommendations and amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Branson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be giving my support to the Conservative amendment for having elections next May. I say this as someone who has already lost one seat in Havant Borough Council a few years ago, and a strong possibility I may not retain my Hampshire County Council seat in May. However, the threat of losing my seat is no good reason for elections to be postponed. I believe strongly in democracy and that my residents should have the right to vote, even if I don't necessarily agree with the results. However, I am concerned that having elections will reduce the capacity for local government reform and to be delivered efficiently in the timescale that this Labour government has forced upon us. If you look at all the different options for LGR in Hampshire and the lack of consensus as to how Hampshire should be reorganised, I think one realises what a mammoth task it is. We supported the setting up of a combined authority and the elections of a mayor, which has sadly been delayed for no good reason, but LGR as such was not in the Labour Party manifesto. However, since I was first elected as a county councillor nearly 9 years ago, I have been involved in the scrutiny of country parks and have seen many improvements that have made them more sustainable and have increased visitor numbers. Saunderson Country Park, it's in my division. It's my happy place, and I visit it regularly, and I take all my visitors there. I take the family there, we play with frisbee, etc., etc. And the view from the terrace is probably one of the best inland views in Hampshire. I've also visited Leek, QE Park, Royal Victoria. They're all wonderful parks. However, all the country parks work together, and many staff work across more than one location. If LGR goes ahead, the parks will mostly be in different unitary authorities, and they could lose their identities and the qualities that make them so special. I have sat on 3 scrutiny boards for many years and well aware of the marvellous jobs our officers and staff do. As chairman of the governors of a secondary school in a deprived area, I know how much support Hampshire has given them and how concerned they are about being reorganised into an area where the existing unitary authority has turned most of their schools into academies. As chairman of the Universal Services Select Committee, we have scrutinised Hampshire highways. They maintain 5,500 miles of highway, and despite financial constraints, they do a pretty good job. I think if you travel into some different authorities, you realise how good. I admit it's not perfect, but mending potholes is a bit like painting the Forth Bridge, never ending. However, in terms of how the county highways currently operates, it does not align with any map or LGR confederation. I think it will be a nightmare to sort out. Also, the economies of scales will be hard to replicate in the new 3 or maybe 4 unitary mainland authorities. One of the proposals for LGR does include boundary changes around Havant, which do make sense. And I do understand that boundary changes could hold up the process. As I've mentioned before, the north of Havant new estates are being built across local government boundaries. The roads entering these estates are all in Havant, but many of the homes are in East Hampshire. It is not acceptable that a semi-detached house can be in 2 different unitary authorities. This is a major change for local government, and I hope we could get it right, rather than rush it through for an ill-conceived timetable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm speaking mostly against the Leader's amendment because I don't believe in his predictions. They don't tend to come true. If we go back to 2024, LGR and mayoral elections or mayoral moralities being created was all covered by the government, and the priority programme was offered to councils and a timetable was set out. And the Leader told us we can get on that priority programme. We are Hampshire. We have vast capacity. We are a strong council. We're in a good position. We can go onto the priority programme and deliver for the people of Hampshire. And we all agreed with him. And then a few months later, we get to 2025, we cancelled the elections. It was as if a surprise that during all this process of being on the priority programme, it's going to be quite awkward and difficult to have changes of administration, as if he was surprised to learn there was elections shortly after he said we should be on the priority programme. And obviously we voted against it, but the council decided that it would postpone the elections to be much easier the following year, even though that timetable that you're already seeing would be we would be at this critical point right now. And so we get to this year and go, well, we can't postpone the elections again, we need to postpone LGR, which makes you wonder why we got on the priority programme in the first place if we really think we wouldn't be ready for another 2 years. So I want to look at his forward thinking again, because he says we could just delay LGR, because it will be much easier over a longer period of time, as if we're going to have far more resources and less demand on our services in a year's time or 2 years' time. He knows, and it's very clear in the report, every year this council has more demand on its resources and less financial clout to deliver and meet those needs. So it's not going to get easier in future years. It's only going to get harder. The capacity is not going to grow. Maybe he thinks it's easier because there'll be no elections the following year, except I think there's all-out elections in East Hampshire in 27 planned and all-out elections in the New Forest in 27. Perhaps he doesn't care about those authorities. So it's a nonsense to say we need to delay. For the public watching this, it's quite clear. We cancelled last year, really for very weak reasons. There's possibly stronger reasons this year. There's an old saying that they couldn't organise something in a brewery. We have the embarrassment of the Conservatives couldn't organise an election in a democracy, because that's where we are. And finally, I want to do, Councillor Mann's made a point that we're not in control, the government will make a decision. They're wrong, he's wrong. The government cannot make the decision. They can make a decision, but we can change it. And I made the offer at Basingstoke-and-Deane, I'll make the same offer now. I've spoken to the electoral services in Basingstoke-and-Deane. We have capacity, we can easily deal with elections, we've got borough elections. If the government decide to cancel the county council elections or any elections, certainly the county council elections, I'm happy, if the other 9 county councillors from Basingstoke-and-Deane do the same, to resign my seat on the 1st of March to force a by-election on the 7th of May. So we can all have our elections anyway, regardless of what the government say. Happy to do that. Looking forward to others making the same commitment. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCatter, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm going to talk about 2 things. The first one, which is the rules of the game, and I'm intrigued by what Councillor James just said, and I fundamentally agree with it, a lot of what he says. Elections results should stand, particularly when they're referendum results, when you ask people what they think, and we follow their advice, even if we didn't vote with the majority. But my real point about the rules of the game is we have a very clear mandate from the government of what we get elected. It's every 4 years, we know who can vote. I'm just going to give you the numbers to people in my area, Petersfield, Butser. I represent 18,000 people. It's a fairly typical size. 2,700 of them kindly voted for me at the last election. 2,700 didn't vote for me, they voted for one of my opponents. 9,000 people, half the numbers of residents, didn't vote. Another 3,500 weren't allowed to vote by the government because they're under the age of 18. So my point is, I represent all of them, those who voted for me, those who voted against me, those who chose not to vote, and those who weren't allowed to vote. And I tried my best to actually look after all of them and all of their interests. And I'm really keen that that process is repeated. The second point I want to make is about scrutiny and governance. Clearly, we as a county council have councillors who have a responsibility to try and look after the interests of our residents and to scrutinise the decisions and the thought process of not just the executive, but also of the officers. That is a complex process when we look at the amount of information we hold on our residents and we look at the services that we provide. I'm particularly interested in shared services. We provide shared services for 85,000 employees, 3 million residents. And I'm really concerned that that scrutiny process doesn't devolve some of that scrutiny to bought services from other councils. I fundamentally disagree with what Councillor Porter says about being able to buy services. I do not understand how you scrutinise a service you bought from a third party when that third party is in charge of it. I don't see that's part of our responsibility. I don't think that our residents want us to buy services from other people who we can't then scrutinise. And I think one of the biggest risks of LGR is that that whole process of scrutinising not just LGR, but also devolution, is going to be much more complex than the government currently think, and therefore we should be realistic that there's going to be more delays the whole way through the process, and therefore the government timetable is today unrealistic. And on that basis, I support both the Conservative amendments about going ahead with the elections and also about being realistic that LGR isn't going to happen on the timetable that the government proposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on the list is Councillor Parker, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful in particular to Councillor Crawford for stealing a lot of my thunder, because part of my thesis, Chairman, is that this is going to cost us a lot of money. The estimate in the report is between 80 and 132 million, depending on various things. I think it's actually going to be an underestimate, but that's kind of beside the point. The thing is that this is taking money away from somebody's Aunt Alice who's ill somewhere, from children who are in need of care from the council. And so inevitably, whatever it does is going to inhibit our capacity somewhere. So you need to think about this kind of value, the entire value, incidentally, more than the entire value of our pothole budget, that's going to be there taking funds away from other things. But I think my real point is that this is a huge risk. The Councillor Taylor mentioned that we need to consider the risk. The biggest risk, in my view, is we do this in undue haste. And we make a Horlicks of it, and people, long after I've dead and gone, certainly from politics, will carry that particular can. I think the real urgency is to get through to the government that if they really want to stick to this rushed timetable, they are going to cause LGR to fail, and it's going to be on their watch and their fault. And I will be happily pointing the finger at the government if they're doing that. And I think we need to make sure that we emphasise to the government that the risk, the capacity risk, is more their end than ours, and the capacity risk is doing it in stupid haste. So I entirely support Nick Adams-King's amendment. I think it's essential we make that particular point to government. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, I just want some clarification as one of the newbies. Have we got one amendment or two?
Yes,
so,
there
so
are
the
two on
fact
the floor.
that the original...
And we'll vote on the Liberal Democrat amendment first, and then we'll go back
Will the Conservative amendment not form part of the substantive? No. No. So we'll vote three times then? Okay, that's helpful, thank you. I found this morning's debate very helpful and very illuminating, and it's been good that I've not heard across the chamber anybody arguing in principle for a delay. We've heard arguments about the importance of democracy. However, and I've just used the word, I have heard too many howevers and buts to qualify that commitment to the democratic process. I think we all accept that every time we go through a democratic process, every time we have an election, it creates more work, it creates more strain on resources, and clearly a restructure or a reorganisation will create even more work. The key question that we have to address this morning, I think, is how important is democracy to each one of us? And how important is it that our residents and communities have faith in our system? There has been a change in the political mood in our country over the last few years, and there is a growing sense of disillusionment in the process. We've all seen what that has led to. I have no doubt that the government would be quite happy if our elections were delayed. And they won't just be delayed for 1 year, there'd be a very weak case for the elections to happen next year. And in the letter that we've received, there was nowhere in that letter that we were asked to give a view, or we were being consulted on what our view is on the timescale and some of the challenges that local government reorganisation has. It's all about how confident are we that the election should go ahead. Let me just read again the letter from the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has adopted a locally led approach. He is clear that should the council say they have no reason for postponement, then he will listen. So I think we should be very clear, we have no reason for postponement. We want the elections to take place because we believe in democracy. It goes on to say, but if you voice genuine concerns about your capacity, and that concern could be given in, well, actually, we think we need more time,
then we will take those concerns seriously. And it will be the Secretary of State who will then make a decision whether our election happens or whether it's postponed. Anything other than a clear message to the government that we believe the election should take place, whatever, will I believe, lead to a postponement. And the Liberal Democrat amendment, effectively, the wording, whether it's, the wording is put together to make that point. It takes out any question around the capacity question. It's saying straight down the line, we believe we have the capacity to run the elections. Clearly, there will be capacity impacts on the council, as there is in every other election. But we believe the most important thing is that the elections happen in May. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Vaughan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I too support elections in May, and there are risks, clearly. I have sent a report to the leader, so I'll just take a few bits out of that report. The problem with the fire service is, and always has been, governance and funding. One of the benefits of fire and rescue of a delay to LGR would be that this would ease the demands on county council officers, which would ensure they have capacity to support fire and rescue transferring to the new combined county authority under devolution. Now, in terms of devolution does have various impacts to fire and rescue, since it would see the current function of the fire authority move to the mayor. And in terms of that governance, at the moment, because it's still early and largely unknown, there is uncertainty about how fire and rescue will have a voice and potentially a vote on the combined authority board or shadow board between the date of transfer and the election of a mayor. This is currently a risk because it is unknown and needs working through. We currently do not know whether the functions of the fire authority discharged by a single interim deputy mayor or commissioner, or whether a fire authority style committee be established by the combined authority board between now and the election of a mayor. This is currently a risk because it is unknown and needs working through. The current date of transfer for fire and rescue functions to the combined county authority is set for the 1st of April 27. This will be 1 year before the election of a mayor, so this does present some risk in terms of how political direction is set by the shadow and interim board arrangements. This is currently a risk because it is still unknown. In terms of finances, fire funding under a mayor is not ring-fenced, which is a worry. So there is the potential of a mayor in the future reallocating fire funding for other purposes. However, in the devolution bill, there are transparency provisions which require the mayor to consult with scrutiny functions and combined authority board, which is made up of leaders of the upper tier authorities, on any proposals to change fire budgets or precept allowances. This does provide elements of protection against the mayor removing funding from fire and rescue budgets, though the risks still remain. The current fire authority receives no capital funding to fund our investments in estates, vehicles and equipment. The new combined county authority may receive capital funding in the future, but even if it does not, the mayor can decide to allocate precept funds to pay for fire estate, vehicles and equipment, perhaps doing so collaboratively with both fire and police assets to benefit their economies of scale. This could be a benefit to fire and rescue. But frankly, we do not fully understand who funds the costs associated with fire transferring into the new combined authority. This is a risk because it is unknown and needs working through on 2026. I support the leader's recommendations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call Councillor Carpenter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Re-postponement of elections, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Labour has stitched us up good and proper and will probably continue to do so. I'm against postponement and I'll just leave that part at that. Turning to council reorganisation, in my opinion, Labour's current approach is ill thought out and dangerous. We were given arbitrary and unevidenced criteria on which to base our unitary council proposals from the beginning, and an unrealistic time frame to reorganise. And the desperately slow government decision around the choice of new unitary boundaries is ridiculous and very unfair. The process has certainly not been driven by what is the best for the people of Hampshire, nor based on improving the services Hampshire's councils currently provide. I've said for many years, as most of you know, there is a better way to change our two-tier council system, and I think it does need changing. A single Hampshire unitary based on the existing county council boundary with strong local area offices where boroughs and districts currently sit would allow a planned transition, continuity and far less risk. Instead, what is being proposed is unnecessarily complicated, rushed and disruptive. I have the pleasure of being the councillor champion for Hampshire's music service. Hampshire Music Service operates across the county council area and is one of the largest music services in the country. Hundreds of specialist teachers support thousands of children through whole class teaching, small group and individual tuition, orchestras and other ensembles, and crucially long-term progression routes. Good musical learning depends on continuity, consistency, and high-quality opportunities to excel. The music service currently provides that. The service has trusted relationships with a large skilled workforce. An excellent music service the size of Hampshire's is actually many years in the crafting. The current proposal for new unitary councils to be in place by 2028 gives the service an extremely tight time frame to reorganise their complex county-wide provision and resources, the enormity of their job to reshape governance and implementation of new funding models and staff structures carries real risk to the delivery of music teaching, to the progress of children's musical learning, and actually to the path of talented young people taking steps towards a career in the music profession. National bodies also share these concerns. Music Mark has warned that council reorganisation is likely to destabilise county-wide music services where new authority boundaries don't align with existing service footprints. And that backs up my preference for a large unitary on the county council's existing boundary, actually, not this shambles of a reorganisation we presently have on our plate. Local government change should strengthen services, not weaken those that already work really well. If I cannot see how the current good work of Hampshire Music Service can possibly be sustained or transferred successfully across new council structures at this pace without loss of service quality and excellence, and I really cannot, then I can only conclude that Labour's chosen route to LGR is totally irresponsible and they should row back on it right now.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Drew, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and happy 2026 to everyone, and may all the breaks mend quickly. I'm very happy to support, Chairman, the amendment that has been put forward by the Leader of the Council, Nick Adams-King. I am not happy to delay elections any further. We've had one delay, as has been mentioned, for devolution. Devolution generally is a good thing. It brings more power to the county. Can I also support Councillor Jackie Branson's point on country parks? Could I add the need for considering the nature recovery strategy that was only launched last month, and footpaths? And also, you'd expect me to mention waste and recycling, Project Integra and Simpler Recycling. As Nick Adams-King, the leader, said, that's because, as many of you know, I'm the rubbish councillor on Test Valley. But thank you for the support. But just putting a cross on a piece of paper, or as someone said, I forget who, mucking about with elections, is only part of a democratic society. I'd like to take a broader look, if I may. It includes accountability, justice, the rule of law, and a free press. We have all of those. That's a good thing. But let me give you some examples where it's not happening. You'll have seen the news that protesters in Iran, in 100 cities, Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, they want dignity and a country that works. not just a cross on a piece of paper. Justice is incredibly difficult to find at the moment in Palestine, Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, frankly from all sides. The rule of law is being challenged in Minneapolis. Apparently the government has given some of their agents total immunity from prosecution for doing anything. And a free press. I'm sure some of you will know that Russians can be arrested for holding up a piece of blank paper. There's no free press in that country. We do have that here. Russian presidential candidates need to get approval from the Russian president, as they do in Hong Kong. So, Chairman, my conclusion, the world may well be on fire, and I could have mentioned Caracas, Nuuk, that's the capital of Greenland, and Ukraine, but I won't. It seems like it is to me. Our elections should go ahead. Let me just repeat that. Our elections should go ahead. But this is not our decision. Over to you, government.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dunning, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be supporting the motion not to postpone the County Council elections in May 2026, and I also support the Conservative amendment. As the only Reform member of this council, I'd be very disappointed not to have elections this May. Should I be elected this May, I would welcome new councillors who support Reform policies. Even the Chief Executive of the Electoral Commission regarding this proposed postponement has said, and I quote, "We note the government's statement in Parliament on the 18th of December inviting councils to raise capacity concerns and seek to postpone elections in May 2026. We are disappointed by both the timing and the substance of the statement. Scheduled elections should, as a rule, go ahead as planned and only be postponed in exceptional circumstances. We are concerned by the possibility of some council elections in May being postponed, and even more by any further postponements to those which already have been deferred in 2025. As a matter of principle, we do not think that capacity constraints are a legitimate reason for delaying long-planned elections. Extending existing mandates risks affecting the legitimacy of local decision-making and damaging public confidence. There is a clear conflict of interest in asking existing councils to decide how long it will be before they are answerable to the voters. Voters must have a say on those that represent them at local government." End quotes. In law, timing of local elections is governed by the Local Government Act, which is free from government authority. There is a precedent to say that local elections can be postponed for a year, but they cannot be postponed for 2 years unless there is a national security issue, such as war or pandemic. Judicial review can also be used if a government exceeds its authority. Perhaps another year of Labour government does constitute a national emergency. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just keep coming back to one central point, like Councillor Bailey and others, that these elections just have to go ahead. People have spent centuries pushing, protesting, standing up for their right to have a voice in the way they're governed. And I do think it's worth reflecting on what it would say to our residents if these elections were set aside again because of the way our response to central government is worded. They were angry last year, and they will be more so this year, and their faith in the democratic process will be further eroded. I don't underestimate in any way the scale of local government reorganisation. It is complex, and it will be demanding. And officers have rightly raised concerns that the election period could be constraining. But I think we need to be clear about what that actually means. The election period doesn't actually stop the council from governing. Yes, it limits political campaigning using public resources, which does limit major decisions being made. However, officers can and do continue planning and preparing for reorganisation during that time period. And many of the critical decisions in the reorganisation timetable including the overall model and the structural changes order, sit with central government, not with this council. So I'm not persuaded that holding elections in May 2026 would prevent all essential decisions being made. We shouldn't forget that the current administration was elected in 2021. This was before the devolution white paper, before the reorganisation proposals, and before the move to establish a new strategic Hampshire authority. These are profound changes. Residents must be given the say in who takes those changes forward. That feels especially important when we're talking about pressing ahead with a new strategic authority several years before residents will have a chance to elect a new mayor. If we're asking people to accept new structures, new layers of government, the democratic consent becomes more important, not less. Councillors elected in 2026 would serve a clear, short mandate focused on the transition, scrutiny, protecting local identity in that process, which I know is important to all of us. And as I've already said, the current administration doesn't have that mandate. I'd also argue that as this council's priority is to stand up for Hampshire, a freshly elected council would have stronger legitimacy with the government, can better challenge funding assumptions, can credibly speak for our residents during the local government reorganisation. If, because of the wording of our amendment, of our letter, our response to the government, we were seen to be somehow giving the government the option to not let those elections go ahead, I think that is fundamentally wrong. Therefore, I will not be supporting the Leader's amendment. As I've already said, my concern is that by adding the question of capacity into that letter, this will give the central government the option to actually cancel those elections. I will be supporting the Liberal Democrat amendment, which unequivocally and very clearly calls for the elections of May 2026 to go ahead. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Councillor. Can we move on then to Councillor Parker-Jones, please?
Thank you very much. I'm reiterating what many of you have said because I absolutely believe that the election must go ahead. I actually voted against postponement last year because I believe so firmly in the democratic ability of our communities to hold us to account and to have the person they wish representing them. I'm also concerned about the timescales for local government reorganisation. However, I do not want us to muddy the waters. I do not want government to assume because things could be difficult to deliver local government reorganisation in the timescale they have set out, that the election could be postponed by them. We must remember it's not our decision, it is their decision. Clearly, I want the best for our residents. And if we need to say to government, local government reorganisation is not achievable in the timescale, that's a completely different conversation we need to hold with them. And I am concerned that by saying that we cannot deliver local government reorganisation, and that may be very correct, it will give them an opportunity to say we should cancel these elections, and that I could not abide. I think we must, absolutely must, let our local residents decide who should be sat here delivering local government reorganisation. I hope that, many of us are back in this chamber. It's been a privilege and an honour to be with you all. And I also am very aware it may not be me sitting here next time, but that shouldn't stop democracy from occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Glenn, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I stand here having just read about another defection. You'll have appeared on your screens to reform. I'll come back to that later. Of course, I will be supporting the Conservative leaders' recommendation at this juncture. In the words of Councillor Bailey, however and but. And we've been hearing about howevers and buts from everybody here. It's been a very, very interesting debate. Do we go ahead with an election or do we not? Okay. If we knew, let me start again. Does my opinion actually matter? I am actually delaying this so I can get a response because I'm... Yes. Oh, really? Right. Because I expect a lot of people to say no. And if my opinion doesn't matter, nor does yours. And that's the rub. That's the problem we've got. If I genuinely knew what the new geographical landscape is going to be of local government organisation, I would be delighted about, absolutely genuinely delighted about local elections going ahead. If we knew that the government was happy with the proposals that we put forward in September, I would genuinely be happy to go ahead. But we're not going to hear about the results of that until probably March. And imagine this, if an election does go ahead. Many of us will be wondering what we're going to say to the electorate at the election if we don't know what is going to happen. If the government questions what we've put forward, and it might, it'll tell us to rethink the whole process again, and frankly, that will be happening in the middle of an election 2 weeks later. Confusion is going to abound. The electorate will not know what is going on, and frankly, I don't think many of us will know what's going on. So, what on earth do we tell the electorate? Now, today will result in only our opinion. Now, we've heard this before. Now, put yourself in the position of the government. Try and do that. Put yourself in the position of the government. It's not popular. It needs time for its policies to bed down. And it is terrified of a local electorate revolution. And I go back to what I've just seen on screen. Okay? It will not want to go to the polls in May. So we can debate this for the rest of the day if we want to, and it'll be an interesting debate, and all of us will agree that there should be an election. But I actually don't think the government is actually going to pay much heed to an individual council. Now, we've been hearing about how we should proceed with this in different languages, and I was going to go into the Scottish vernacular, but I thought I wouldn't do that with you, okay? But it did involve names like Bampops and things like that, okay? But I'll go to the French, the Marseillaise. In a wonderful line, Liberté, liberté, chérie. And that is something we should hold very dear to ourselves. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Merci. Next speaker, please, is Councillor McAvoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, everything has really been said, so I only have a few words to say on this matter. Do I want to serve my constituents for an extra year? Well, of course I do. That's all I've ever wanted to do, despite the efforts of lesser individuals here to stop me. Should I serve an extra year without an election? That is a different question. The high financial cost of an election to local taxpayers is a powerful but weak argument, although wasting other people's money is what this dreadful government is always doing. But in any case, they will do what they want about this anyway, so it doesn't really matter what I think. I read somewhere that when power interferes with the timing of a vote, intent is the only thing that matters. Delaying elections to avoid defeat is not governance, It is democratic evasion. I couldn't actually put that better myself. So, of course, I'll be voting with the leader on his amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thierry, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the other day, I was in my office writing my memoirs, and I got to the point where I recorded what a wonderful chairman, full of wisdom, we have currently before us. And then the doorbell rang, and before me was an angry, dissatisfied constituent. I had to let Mrs. Thierry come in. But she really was angry. She said, I've just come back from shopping and I've just driven into one of your potholes. And the cost of a new tyre is just about half a pair of shoes. She said, you know, you go on about this council business and the malarkey that you get up to. I think it's about time that I stood for council. So I don't want you messing about with these elections. Those elections must go ahead. The people of Ringwood must have the opportunity to vote me in. Now that's a warning for you. That's a warning for this council if Mrs. Thierry was to be elected and to join you in these hallowed portals. And then she issued another blessed bombshell. She said to me, I don't know quite which party to support. She said, I'm thinking about joining the Liberal Democrats. Oh, dearie me. What else can go wrong in life? You know, we've got a Labour government, and my wife is thinking of joining the Liberal Democrats. I said, look, just remember, a vote for Liberal Democrats is a wasted vote, and apart from that, they're a bit on the woke side. She said, is that the case? I said, it definitely is. So she said, when I get elected, those officers on the Highways Department had better watch out, because I will have Ringwood as a non-pothole area. That will be my slogan for being elected. No potholes in Ringwood. Of course they won't. Listen, my dear friend, I haven't ignored my wife, and I don't think anybody else will. So, the point about it is this, is that the people of our constituencies must have the opportunity to say who they want to represent them. That's the thrust of it. The pothole, in one or two ways, is probably fairly incidental. But my wife is concerned about potholes, as our residents are. And so one of the things that we must ensure is whatever happens, that the day-to-day operations of this council continues. Now, Mrs. Thierry doesn't trust me for very, very good reasons. And she said, I don't know how you're going to vote, whether you're going to vote right or whether you're going to go left. So she said, I'm coming this morning. I'm going to sit in the public gallery just to make sure you behave yourselves. Chairman, Mrs. Thierry.
Right, and welcome, Mrs. Thierry. May I call Councillor Briggs, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe in democracy. I feel we have a government that doesn't. It tells us one thing, changes their mind the next. We were told we had to have a mayor in by a certain time. No, we don't. Now, because I believe in democracy, I have to vote for the election. But when you talk to the residents and you tell them that when we have an election, the money it's going to cost, and we could have And it's their choice, people with no experience. But then the following year, we have another election, different people can come in again. And my real fear is that, and it goes across all parties, that we will lose the leadership that we all give, the Lib Dems, Labour, Reform. We need continuity. Having spent 13 years on children's services and adult services, LGR, which we didn't vote for, is so complex that we need so much more time. We don't even know our areas. And are we doing the best by having the election? Because we will use the continuity. And it's probably easy for me to say, because you all know I'm not standing again. But please all think carefully of what is going to happen to our residents. And no one knows who is going to get voted in again. We need continuity to put this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dowden, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. May I give a bit of advice to Mr. Councillor Thierry? Mrs. Thierry, are you listening? Please make sure you have more than 2 Weetabixes a day and you will get your potholes sorted if you are elected to the council. Can I first of all say that I am one of the longest serving councillors, not the longest, but one of the longest serving councillors on this council. And it's been, can I say, a really privilege to be a county councillor for the years that I've been, since January 1992. We've had excellent officers. I'm on both councils, a district and a county council. And I'm generally sorry to see the county council go, I have to tell you that. But on the other hand, of course, it's government that make decisions, and they've made it, that we've had a break-up and local government reorganisation. But I still think it's a sad thing. But there again, we have to move on with the times. When I say to people, it was the speeches here today in the county council. In all the time I've been a district council and a county councillor, I have to say some of the presentations at the county council have been excellent. And we've heard quite a lot this morning, quite frankly. And I totally agree with Councillor Withers, the chair of HUSC. It's always been a real concern of mine, adult social care, it really has. And I fear for it in local government reorganisations because of the expertise that may get sort of spread a little bit, if you like, with senior officers as well. But we can't change what governments want, and we have to work with it. And I'm sure the new council, when it comes along, because I won't be part of it, because I've said a year ago, and I told all my residents that I would not stand at the next election. But I didn't want to cause a by-election to my residents, quite frankly, because I see it, sadly, I see it as a waste of money, because there's a shortage of money in any case. Elections, by-elections are. But if they're caused by death or whatever, that's a necessity. But you don't cause them unnecessarily, in my opinion. But what I would like to end up by saying is that whatever we decide today, because as I said, I won't be standing, and it makes no difference to me, quite frankly. But I just feel that there's been a lot of good presentations, and all I will say is the elections must go ahead for democracy's sake this May, whatever happens. And I very much hope the government listen at last and make sure those elections do take place. And I think, and with local government reorganisation, we need to know, and I asked the question even at Test Valley the other day, when are we going to get the response? And the answer back was likely to be March. Well, quite frankly, there's no reason why we should wait to March. They know what they're going to do. They know it now. They could tell us now.
Right.
And so I urge whatever we send
Thank
from
you,
this
Councillor.
council to the government, ensure that we demonstrate to them we want to know as quickly as possible. I don't need to say any more.
No.
Thank you all for the presentations this morning, because it's been very interesting to listen. For all, I can't really fault a lot of it.
You're about half a minute beyond your time, Councillor, but
That's
bearing in
fine.
mind your long service, I'll let you carry on. The next member, please, who is asked to speak is Councillor Tustain.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief. I'm not going to talk about the elections. I think there's consensus pretty much clear that everyone is in support of continuing with the elections. We've talked about democracy. What I'm going to do is put my project management hat on here, as Councillor Taylor talked about earlier. I have many years' experience in project management and I understand the implications of it. One thing, making assumptions about capacity and things is always something that's very difficult, particularly things that are outside of our control. So I think it's really important that we look at what's within our control and consider what we're implementing. So one of the things you have in project management dependencies, we have a massive external dependency from the government on when they actually deliver the LGR decision. And that will have a huge impact on the work and capacity. And I think it's really important that we actually push back on the project board, the owners of the project, to make sure that we identify a clear date. That date, if it shifts towards the end of March, as has been highlighted as a risk on the last page of the report, will mean that we'll have a situation where we've got a potential squeeze or even a risk in the elections taking place. Without having that, now that is without our control and that is from the government, and we need to make sure we get that. Sorry, I've lost my, just get my notes back. Can't do my pin, right. The second point we've got as well is the third recommendation, talks about taking into consideration everything that has been debated here, and I think that's really important. I am a little bit in two minds about asking and saying we should have a delay on LGR. I think we need to state the risks in this project, as is our duty as the managers of this project and being the implementers. And I think that also includes making sure capacity of the resources and the officers. And I think as the full council here, we have a duty to the staff in this authority to make sure, because I know what it's like when you have a project and it is squeezed from a 100% timeline into a 50% timeline, and what that actually has, the impact on people and the work pressures that does, and then the risks of things going wrong. That is important. What I would request of the leader is that we consider that this idea about capacity is mentioned as an implication of the risk. We don't necessarily ask the government to delay LGR, but we just state the case. I think that is a really important distinction here, because I think we've talked a lot around this as to whether or not we should be asking them. As a project manager, I would be pushing back on the project board and just stating where we're at with the risks we've got and what we can do, and then asking them to make their decisions as is within their accountability and responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Latham, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether or not any of you or most of you do citizenship ceremonies. I expect you do. I did one last month, and happy occasions.
It's when we tell citizens of what their benefits are becoming a British citizen. One is democracy, and of course, number two, which we always encourage to tell them, is that they have the right to vote. And they have a right to vote every 4 years. Have to confess that last year I voted to defer elections. In due conscience, I don't think I could go ahead and do another ceremony if I voted to postpone the elections again. So like everybody else in this House, I suspect we're all going to be saying the elections should go ahead. And indeed they should. The difficulty, so that's the easy question. The second question is whether we support a delay with regard to local government reform. Frankly, I don't know how far local government reform has gone within the last 12 months. And therefore, it seems to me very difficult to progress local government reform when we don't know what it will look like. We have complied with all the requirements of the central government in terms of what our proposal is in terms of Hampshire County Council and East Hants. We know the other authorities have put their proposals forward, and a lot of them are different. They involve boundary changes, and until such time as we all know how they will change, I can't see how local government reform can go very far. Once we know that, then it can. So I think it's absolutely essential that we get an earlier date decision from central government before the elections take place in April. So that's number one. May, sorry, yes. I note the government want to tell us about, or want our opinions on local government reform. I just wonder how much consultation they had with regard to the mayoral elections. Who made that decision, and what was the logic for it? Because I don't know if anyone else does. So they're listening to us, but I don't know what they did about that. We've heard in this report the capacity issues. There's no doubt about it will take a lot of capacity. The officers will need a lot of time to do local government reform, and that needs to be done carefully when they have all the information before them. And that is why I strongly support a deferral of local government reform for another year as set out by the leader.
Thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor North has touched his button.
What Councillor Latham said about the different iterations of LGR, because in Test Valley, you reference East Hampshire, there's 4 different geographies that we could be in this stage. We could either be in a mid-Hampshire authority with the New Forest, without the New Forest. We could lose parts of our southern border, or we could be put in with Southampton. And obviously that has an impact on our capacity, but if you look at the services that obviously the County Council run in the Test Valley geography, they all need to be disaggregated in the various different geography as well. And that, I think, causes an issue unless the government are clear, stick to their time scale, which they haven't done so far. And in answer to Councillor Dowden's question, because he was referring to a question that he asked me in a private Test Valley briefing last week, where I said that actually we're led to believe that the decision will come in March or late March, because that is what MHCLG and MHCLG officials have been indicating. But there are also rumours abound that they might make an earlier decision than that. We've heard from officials that actually, in terms of the consultation that closed yesterday, actually all of the public consultation is going to be read by an AI robot. It's only going to be the statutory consultees that are going to be read by a human. So I think, and they may well have already made their mind up in terms of what the shape is to come. So I think the government have got two options, and I don't think elections should be delayed, but I do have concerns about capacity in relation to delivering LGR, and the government need to either delay local government reorganisation by a year, which is why I support the Leaders' Amendment, or make a decision more quickly so we can all get on with it. And I think we all want to get on with it, but if they're not going to do that, then it needs to be delayed. So thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Now, we haven't had anything from the seconders of the motion, so I'm going to call Councillor Todd first and then Councillor Warwick afterwards. So, Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As Councillor Tree and Councillor Bailey highlighted, there are 3 killer sentences in the Minister's letter. The Secretary of State is clear that should a council say they have no reason for postponement, then we will listen. But if you voice genuine concerns about your capacity, then we will take those concerns seriously. To that end, the Secretary of State is only minded to make an order to postpone elections for 1 year for those councils who raise capacity concerns. And the choice before us today is firstly, whether we give them any genuine concerns about our capacity, and secondly, whether we make any link of any kind between those concerns and going ahead with elections. 3 killer sentences, and there are 4 critical words in that letter. Will our letter say, quote, there is no reason for postponement, those 4 words, or not? As others have said, elections should only be delayed for the most serious reasons. In Winchester, they were delayed in World War I, World War II, and the pandemic. They went ahead in 1972, ahead of shadow elections in 1973, and the previous reorganisation in 1974. I think only 1 or 2 councillors talked about the risk of a change of leadership, the need for continuity, and in essence made a case for never having elections to this council ever again. A 7-year term for people in leadership elected for 4, or if LGR is delayed by a year, an 8-year term. But the overwhelming majority of councillors across the whole chamber made the point that elections going ahead is non-negotiable for all the reasons that have been outlined. And whatever we decide, some of the impacts of elections would happen even if the county ones didn't go ahead. Our districts and boroughs, as far as I understand it, are all asking for elections to go ahead. If the government listens, the polling stations will be staffed, the counting agents will be employed, the pre-election period will be in place anyway. The only factor is the change of administration. And frankly, we talk about services. That is one of the most important choices and services that this council offers the public. Don't get me wrong. I understand the case for delaying LGR. I understand the huge amount of work involved. I understand the challenges and risks. I understand the huge demand that it will put on our officers and members. And I understand the case for a longer, more deliberative approach to that transition. But that is inherent in local government reorganisation. It's not driven by having elections, and we should not, must not imply that it is. It is essential that there is no linkage between elections and that delay. So first of all, vote for our amendment. There is no case for voting against it. It just states that we don't want to delay elections. And while I understand the leaders' concerns about the capacity needed for LGR, we must not give the government the slightest excuse or reason for delay. The leaders of this council, shaping LGR, representing us on the combined authority, and delivering services and shaping services for the remaining life of this council need a fresh mandate. They need to be chosen by the public, and there must be no risk to that. The County Council's letter needs to state the words, no reason for postponement, and the Conservative amendment doesn't guarantee that. Worse than that, it puts it at risk. Elections must go ahead. Nothing must stand in the way of that. Capacity is a concern, not because of elections. It's inherent in LGR. And the government has said they will use any capacity argument linked to elections to delay. So on that basis, please support our amendment. And as things stand, we cannot support the Conservative amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll now ask Councillor Warwick to give her seconding speech.
Thank you, Chairman, and no further debate from me. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, then, we now go back to the leader, who will reply to the debate.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for all of the different points that you've made. As usual, I will just go back through everybody to firstly make sure that you understand that I've heard you, because I think this is a particular time when that is important, more important than ever. But also, hopefully, to answer some of the points that have been made, just for a matter of clarity. I think, Peter, the fact that people come here wishing to become British citizens, you are absolutely right to highlight the fact that many of them have come from places where they are not democracies. And one of the reasons why they come here is not just for a better life, but also a life in a democratic and free country, one that often many of them have left countries that are quite different to that. And to suggest that we should not go ahead with elections would be to undermine their confidence that they've placed in us. And Jackie makes an important distinction around the issue of local government reorganisation's capacity and the potential delay to LGR. However, there is a link there. There is a piece that worries me, and it's a piece that worries me in terms of coming back to what Martin has just said. We've been asked a question. So the important part of the letter is not just that the sentences that Martin read out, but also those that I mentioned. The question we are being asked by government. And to duck that question is to duck the whole point of their letter. And so we need to answer it honestly. We need to be honest with people about our answer, but we equally need to give them the answer that tells them why we do not believe that the concern that they have suggested we might raise would be a reason to postpone these elections, because there is a different way. There is a different way to deliver this without having any concern around capacity. And so, yes, Martin, absolutely, there is no reason for postponement, and the letter will say that. But I will also not duck the fact that they've asked us to get a technical and honest opinion from our officers, and that's what they have given us. And to not mention it would be to ignore the professional advice of the officers that we employ and rely upon. Alan has been an advocate for adult social care for much longer than I've ever been a councillor. As always, I listen very carefully to what you say, Alan, and you are absolutely right to talk about the duty that we have to the most vulnerable people in our community. And Anne is right, experience is vital, but also giving people the choice to choose new representatives over experience is also vital. And I would argue that experience was vital last year to deliver within a very short time frame devolution, whereas now it is entirely right that new representatives might be chosen to take this process of local government reorganisation forward. But if that happens, then we should ensure that they have the time to do so with confidence and in a safe and in an effective way. It's, Michael, it's a joy to have Mrs. Thierry with us. Welcome, Mrs. Thierry. We're often blessed by stories of you here, and it's lovely to put a face to the name. I very much hope you will stand, and I very much hope to see you sitting here in one of these different groups at some point next year. But you're right. People need to understand who their local representative is, and they need the choice to decide who that person should be from May onwards. And similarly, Alexis, we would all love to continue, but we all accept that that choice might be different from the electorate. And elections, you are absolutely right, are never a waste of money. They are never a waste of capacity. They are never a waste of resource. Which is why, absolutely, Lou, elections must go ahead. And we're not saying that we can't deliver reorganisation with elections. What we're answering honestly is a question about whether that impacts capacity, which it does, because self-evidently, as I've said, it does. But that's not a reason to delay them. And Paul is right to point out the long history of people agitating for elections. There are not very many people who have fought for that right in this country and are fighting for that right elsewhere in the world, exactly as David has mentioned. And Barry might well be joined by other councillors of his new party after May. There are people who consider that might be one of the reasons why this Labour government are trying to find ways by which to delay elections, and that would be entirely wrong. I might fundamentally disagree with everything that Reform stands for, but I wouldn't stop people voting for them because that is entirely their right. And Fran used the term tone deaf. Oh, sorry, Fran, no, she didn't use tone deaf, that's what I'm going to say. Fran talked about the music service, and I am tone deaf. I am horribly tone deaf, so I can't possibly contribute to all of the work that she does in advocating for the music service and for her colleagues. But it's right to say that they really are one of the jewels in the crown of the County Council. And making sure that we have got the capacity and we have got the decision right around how we continue to offer those opportunities to the young people of Hampshire is one of the very, very many challenges we face in delivering local government reorganisation in an effective way. So not only am I tone deaf, but I think the government are tone deaf in trying to force these decisions upon us in such a short space of time. And in a similar way, Rudian is right to point out that we are in a place with the Fire Authority where we have the perverse situation where the government has decided that they should transfer to the auspices of the mayor and then decided that we don't elect a mayor for 2 years. So how does that work and how does that fit in? And that is one of the many challenges and questions that we have and that we have asked for clarification over. And we should, Stuart, absolutely never qualify the democratic process. And that is not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to say to the government is that you must hold elections and that if you think that you can't deliver your plan to your timescale, then you need to change your timescale, not us. The cost of reorganisation is huge, and we remember receiving nothing, no funding for it, Stephen, and you're right to point that out. Just in the way that Rob has pointed out, that the shared services we operate through other councils are a vital issue for them as well as for us. And so making sure that we are able to do so in an effective and safe way is an important thing. Gavin, I have to say, I'm glad you've stayed for my response to you this time, because so often you slip out before I get a chance to answer this for you. The timescales that we set out, I think your memory is slipping a little bit in terms of what we were talking about. If you remember, we decided that we would go ahead with an application for devolution. We then were asked to apply for the priority programme, and then when we'd done that, they said, oh, good news, by the way, you're going to have to undertake local government reorganisation at the same time to this timetable. That was never part of the plan that we were given. It was not part of the Labour Party's manifesto, as has been pointed out, and it is something that we need to make sure we do effectively and well. I'm not very good at predictions. I got the winner of Eurovision right last year. And if I were you, I'd put some money on Malta this year. But what I can predict is that I will do absolutely everything in my power to ensure that the elections go ahead, because that is vital for us all. Jackie, there's no good reason to postpone. It is absolutely right that it's Labour's timescale as well as ours. And I think it's really interesting about the concerns of local schools to make sure that in your patch their voices heard as we go forward. So it's not just about the technical work, it's about making sure that the people on the ground, the people with whom we work, the people who work for us and the people who we serve are fully engaged and understand the changes that are coming. And as Leslie has said, we are already a very lean organisation, so that must in itself impact upon our capacity to do things. Alongside any change that we are making, we are undertaking all of that work that we do day in, day out, with no extra money, with no extra staffing. David, potholes are not going away for the time being. But you know me, I'm an eternal optimist. One day they might. And one day they might because we have delivered prosperity and growth for Hampshire and the Solent. And the way that we did that was to, one of the ways by which we do that is to introduce devolution. And I think, you know, I respect the decision that all of you made last year in not supporting that delay, but I would hope that you recognise the benefit that has come as a consequence of it. But finding reasons to stay in power will never be the right thing to do. And finding reasons to stay in this place, much as we love it, would never be the right thing to do. Juliet and Bill rightly point out the risks that are associated with the social care and the people who we look after. And Alex's point about the significant change that we're undertaking and that we mustn't throughout it undermine the services is exactly at the core of what we need to think about. We need to make sure that at the centre of our thinking is are the people who we serve. And Keith is absolutely right then to point out that that is where we need to defend that service because, let's be honest, government won't be thinking about that at all. They'll just be thinking about how quickly they can obtain the change that they want. Kim, as always, your assistance with clarifying what we're talking about is vital. And I am very happy to ensure that within the letter we ask government to bring forward their decision about the configuration of the councils to a date as soon as possible, but by no later than the end of February. Hopefully that catches Alex's desire for a quicker answer as well. And that thereby lies the issue. We need to know what's happening. We need to have some clarity about what is going to be going on. And Andy, the issue is for us that we can't ignore the government's question they've asked us. So much as we would like to say, just a straightforward, we don't think elections should be postponed, they must go ahead. They've also asked us about capacity, and we've got an honest answer about capacity, and we need to give the government a solution from our perspective. And our solution is not to cancel elections, but if you think, because we've used the word capacity within our answer, that you can't deliver the reorganisation you desire to your timetable, then you should delay the local government reorganisation process. This is not a request to definitely delay it. It's a suggestion to them, a requirement of them to delay LGR rather than delay elections because they should have no excuse to delay them. And that is where Jackie is absolutely right. I have to say that I would be very happy to support the Lib Dem amendment. And it's a shame, actually, we didn't have a conversation about it ahead of time because I think it's absolutely right to focus upon the fact that there is capacity for us to hold the elections. When we talk about capacity, this is not about the capacity that we have to hold an election, to count the votes, to man polling stations, to pay for the electoral administration. This is about our capacity to keep the people of Hampshire safe, to provide them with the services they require, and to ensure that the most vulnerable people in our community receive the same services on the last day of the current configuration of councils as they do on the first day of the new one. There are a couple of things I have to say that worried me about what you said. The first was that I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding, Jackie, when you mentioned this is about merging districts together. It's not about merging districts together. The district boundaries that are being used here are just lines on maps. Districts and boroughs. The important thing is that there are people working in services in each of those district and borough councils. Thousands of them. There are many, many thousands more working in our organisation. And our organisation will be disaggregated to match those new boundaries. Our budget is 3.1 billion. The joint combined budgets of those district and borough councils come to less than a third of that. That's not saying that, you know, that we're any more important or any more vital to that process, but the services we deliver, people rely on. Aunt Alice could well suffer harm, could well die if we don't get that right. And Kim's absolutely right in saying that, and that is what we must focus upon in ensuring that this process goes ahead in such a way that does allow a democratic choice in May, but also protects all of those people. And if there is a challenge around being able to deliver it to the government's timetable in that process, then we should ensure that. And the other point that concerned me was when you suggested that we can create the unitary authorities and just keep on doing what we're doing now in terms of the services that we offer. We can't do that. On the 31st of March 2028, under the current proposal, this council ceases to exist. We don't give services any longer. We're done, we're gone. The new councils will need to each have a director of children's services who will be legally responsible for the vulnerable children in their care. They will need to have a director of adult social care who will be legally responsible for the adults in their care. And we need to make sure that those people are in place, that those services are correct, and that those services are safely delivered. And that, only second to ensuring that elections go ahead, is at the forefront of all of my thinking. To wrap up, whilst I would happily support the Lib Dem amendment, I'm afraid having discussed it with David, it's one of these either-or situations in terms of us not being able to support both. So I can't support your amendment, but what I will commit to do is to talk to you over the next couple of days to find ways by which we can ensure that the spirit and the wording of your amendment is included in the letter that goes through, and we will make an adjustment to things to our recommendation in Cabinet to best reflect that as we can. So I'm afraid I won't be supporting the Lib Dem amendment. I would recommend our amendment to you. If I might just summarise in the end. Democracy is a privilege. The ability to vote is a privilege. It's a privilege afforded to a minority of people in this world. And while I love this job, you might not think so some days, but while I do, I've loved being the leader of this council. It may well be that the people of Hampshire decide that somebody else could do it far better than me. While I love being the county councillor for Romsey Rural, it might well be that the people of Romsey Rural decide that there is somebody far better suited to represent them than me. So be it. That's democracy. That's something that happens every 4 years in this country. It is something that should happen this May. And let's be clear. This is an attempt by the government, who are running scared of the electorate, to avoid the result they fear. I don't fear that result. It may well mean that I'm not standing either here or in this chamber when we meet at the end of May. But that's the choice of the people out there. They are the people we serve, and they are the people who should be at the forefront of our thinking. So, colleagues, I commend the amended recommendation to you, and I commit to discussing the other amendments' intent with the opposition to ensure that we best represent the views of the entire council in the letter we send on Thursday.
Right, members, we've had altogether, for the record, 28 speakers in that debate. Must be a record, I think, in its own right. We now go to the voting, and what we'll do first is vote on the Liberal Democrat amendment, first of all. Councillor Todd? Yes, certainly. 10 people stand, please. Yeah. We've got 10 just. It's a reflection of the age of some of our councillors, I'm afraid. Will be a recorded vote, all right? So we're voting first of all then on the amendment. We should have it on screen, I think, for the Lib Dem amendment, so we can see what it is. Can we put it on screen, please?
Yeah, I think we just need to take our time a little bit. No.
Sorry?
They want to put it on the screen. People have started voting.
Yeah. You've all started voting. I was asking for the actual amendment to be on the screen, but if you're happy that it's not there, I'm happy and content too. So that's the voting so far. Are there any more votes to come in, please? Right, so that therefore is lost. Okay, and those are the votes. Just check that your name is there, please, and accurately recorded. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the Conservative amendment, and that proposed by Councillor Adams-King and seconded by Councillor Warwick. All those in favour, please show. I think we should have it as a recorded vote, yes. Okay. That was what was meant, yes. So can you press your button for the recording of the vote? Right. Are there any more people to vote, please? In which case, then, that is the score, which is 643 in favour, 9 against, and 2 abstentions. Thank you very much for a most interesting morning.
That now becomes a substantive motion, and then we
Right.
vote on it.
Of course, yeah. We have to, in fact, go to the substantive motion.
Which is now.
And that's what we have as the amended motion, the one that's put forth by Adams-King.
Let me just finish showing this.
Yeah, okay. Are we going to vote on those?
Yeah, so it's just to be really clear, it's the amendment, now we're voting on the substantive motion, which is the motion as amended by the Conservative amendment.
Okay, so now we will again go back to your machines again, please, and we're going to vote those in favour of the substantive motion, and those against and those abstaining.
Chairman, just a quick point of order on technicality. Councillor Cunningham is unable to vote because she's pressed the green button and it needs technical wizards to sort of cancel it so she can vote. Could that be done? Start the whole debate again.
I think the answer, to be fair, is clear. So I don't think we need to worry about that. It's a recorded vote, yes. 49 for, none against, and 2 abstaining. Everyone? You've all voted?
I'll ask Councillor Cunningham, then she wants to confirm her vote, and then that will be recorded.
Yes. Councillor Cunningham, could you confirm your vote, please? You're voting for the substantive recommendation. Can that be recorded, please? Thank you. And that means we have 54 and 2 abstaining. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Just check that your name is on there. Right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a safe journey home and have a happy new year.